I knew the words, I knew the grammar. I could read English books and understand most of them. But when it was time to speak, nothing came out. My mind became crowded. Every sentence started in my head, not in my mouth. I translated each word slowly, checking grammar, searching for the perfect sentence. While I was thinking, the moment passed. The conversation moved on. My answer disappeared before I could say it. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't bad at English. My brain was overloaded. It was doing too many jobs at the same time. Listen, translate, think, correct, judge, all in seconds. English did not flow. It stopped. It froze. My voice waited for permission that never came. And every time this happened, I felt smaller. I started believing silence was safer than speaking. That fear followed me everywhere and shaped how I saw myself daily. This is not a grammar lesson. I will not teach rules, tenses, or long lists of vocabulary. This is a true story. It is my real experience with English, fear, and a brain that never stopped translating. If you struggle to think in English, this story is for you. I ask you to do one simple thing. Listen slowly. Do not translate every word in your head. Let the story come to you naturally. You do not need to understand everything right now. Understanding will come later. If you stay with me until the end, you will understand why your brain keeps translating. You will see how that habit was built. And more importantly, you will learn how to train your brain in a new way, a calmer way, a human way. It happened many times, in many places, and always in the same way. Someone asked me a simple question in English, not a test question, not a difficult one, just a normal question. Something like, "What do you think?" Or, "Can you explain this?" The moment I heard it, my body froze. Inside my head, I knew the answer immediately. In my native language, the idea was clear. I could explain it easily. I could even imagine myself speaking confidently. But English stood between my thought and my voice like a wall. Time became heavy. Everyone waited. That waiting created pressure. My heart started beating faster. My mind rushed. I tried to translate my idea into English, word by word, sentence by sentence. I checked the grammar. I changed the order. I searched for better words. I wanted it to be correct. I wanted it to sound smart. I wanted to avoid mistakes. But while I was doing all of that, something terrible happened. The moment passed. Someone else answered. The conversation moved on. The question was gone. And I stayed silent, holding an answer that no longer mattered. That silence felt like failure, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I didn't say it. In those moments, silence was louder than any mistake could have been. Silence told a story about me. It told others I didn't understand. It told them I had nothing to say. And slowly, I started telling myself the same story. The pressure of time made everything worse. English conversations move fast. People don't wait while you build perfect sentences. There is no pause button. There is no time to translate calmly in your head. You either speak or the moment disappears. And every time I missed that moment, the fear grew. I started expecting failure before it happened. When someone looked at me during a discussion, my body reacted as if danger was coming. My shoulders tightened, my throat closed. Even before the question arrived, I was already preparing to be silent. That is how silence became automatic.
The painful part was this. I was not silent because I had nothing to say. I was silent because I was afraid of saying it wrong, and that fear made silence feel safer than speaking. But safe did not mean good. Each silent moment took something away from me. Confidence, presence, opportunity. I watched myself disappear from conversations, not because I was incapable, but because I was trapped inside my own head. Over time, I stopped seeing silence as a choice. It became my default response, and the more it repeated, the more it felt like who I was. I knew the answer, but I couldn't say it. And in a world that moves fast, silence often feels like failure, even when the truth inside you is clear.
For a long time, this was how my brain worked every time I heard English. First, I listened. Then I translated the words into my native language. Then I thought about the meaning. Then I tried to build an English sentence again. Then I corrected it. And in the end, I did not speak. Everything happened inside my head. While other people were still talking, my brain was already working too hard. It was switching languages, checking grammar, fixing word order, and judging every sentence before it even existed. English was never direct. It always had to pass through translation mode first. That process felt logical. It felt safe, but it was deadly for fluency. By the time I finished translating and fixing my sentence, the conversation had moved on. Someone else spoke. The topic changed. My sentence, still unfinished, became useless, so I stayed quiet again. This happened over and over. My brain was busy. My voice was late. The problem was not my intelligence. The problem was overload. My brain was doing too many jobs at the same time, listening, translating, thinking, correcting, judging, all within a few seconds. No human brain can do that smoothly under pressure. Because of this overload, speaking English felt exhausting. After just a short conversation, my head felt heavy, my energy dropped. I needed silence to recover. English did not feel like communication, it felt like mental work. I noticed something important. When I spoke my native language, I did not translate. I did not plan sentences. I did not correct grammar in my head. Words came out automatically. But with English, nothing was automatic. Everything was controlled. That control slowed me down. The more I tried to control English, the less English came out. Translation mode also created fear, because when you translate, you are always behind. You are always late. And being late makes you feel insecure. You start worrying about speed, about mistakes, about sounding stupid. That worry adds even more pressure to the brain. So the cycle continued. Listen, translate, think, fix, stay silent. Each repetition trained my brain to do the same thing again next time. Silence became predictable. Silence became familiar. Silence became normal. The worst part was that I believed this was how learning worked. I believed thinking more would help. I believed better grammar would fix it. I believed one day my brain would become faster automatically. But translation mode never leads to fluency. It only leads to more thinking and less speaking. I was not practicing speaking. I was practicing translating, and the brain gets good at whatever it practices. So my brain became excellent at being busy, and my voice became excellent at being late. That was the real problem. For a long time, I believed this problem would fix itself. I thought that if I studied more, my brain would slowly stop translating. I thought time alone would solve it. But the opposite happened. The longer I studied English, the more my brain translated. Every new word I learned was connected to my native language.
Every new grammar rule added another step to my thinking process. Instead of becoming faster, my brain became more crowded. Instead of feeling natural, English felt heavier. My brain was not confused, it was trained. The brain always chooses the path it knows best, and I had trained it to translate for years. Every time I listened and translated, I made that path stronger. Every time I stayed silent, I reinforced the same habit. Over time, translation became automatic, just like speaking my native language. That is why the problem never fixed itself. The brain does not change because of time. It changes because of repetition. And I was repeating the wrong behavior. This was not a personal failure. It was not because I was slow. It was not because I lacked talent. It was not because English was too hard. It was because my brain was doing exactly what I had trained it to do. When people say, just practice more, they often mean more study, more reading, more grammar, more vocabulary. But none of those things teach the brain how to react quickly. None of them teach the mouth how to move without permission. So the old habit stayed. The brain followed the old road because it was familiar, safe, predictable. Even when that road led to silence, the brain preferred it over something new and uncomfortable. That is why hope alone never worked. Motivation alone never worked. Knowledge alone never worked. The problem was not inside me. The problem was in my training. And once I understood that, something important changed. If this habit was trained, then it could be retrained, not with more information, but with new behavior, not by thinking harder, but by practicing differently. The problem never fixed itself because it was never designed to. It was trained. From the very beginning, school taught me to translate. Not directly, not on purpose, but through repetition, structure, and reward. The first thing we learned in English class was vocabulary. A new English word always came with a translation. One word in English, one word in my native language. They were connected like a pair. I never learned the English word alone. I learned it through another language. So my brain learned a simple rule. English equals translation. When I saw a word, I did not feel its meaning. I felt its equivalent. English never stood on its own. It always needed permission from my native language first. Then came grammar. Grammar was taught before speaking. Rules came first. Charts, tables, tenses. We learned how sentences should look before we ever used them in real life. We spent hours analyzing sentences, filling blanks, choosing the correct answer. Everything happened on paper. Speaking came later, much later. And when speaking finally appeared, it came with pressure. The teacher asked a question. One student answered. If the answer was correct, it was praised. If it was wrong, it was corrected in front of everyone. Sometimes gently, sometimes not. But the message was clear. Being correct mattered more than trying. So I learned to wait. I learned to speak only when I was sure. I learned to raise my hand only when I had the right answer. I learned that a wrong answer was worse than no answer. Silence felt safer than mistakes. That mindset shaped how my brain worked. English was not a tool for communication. It was a test. Every sentence felt like an exam question. Every conversation felt like evaluation. My brain did not focus on meaning or connection. It focused on correctness. Reaction speed was never trained. No one taught us how to respond quickly. No one taught us how to keep speaking when we made a mistake. No one taught us how to think in English without translating. We were rewarded for accuracy, not for flow. So my brain adapted. It learned to slow down. It learned to check. It learned to wait. Those habits worked well in school. They helped me pass tests. They helped me get good scores. Teachers said I was a good student. But those same habits destroyed my ability to speak naturally. In real life, there is no time to translate. There is no time to check grammar rules. Conversations move fast. People interrupt. Topics change. English in the real world does not wait for you to be correct. My brain was trained for the classroom, not for life. The more years I spent in that system, the stronger the habits became. Translation felt normal. Thinking before speaking felt responsible. Silence felt polite. Fear felt logical. And because school was where I learned English, I believed this was the right way. I believed speaking English meant thinking carefully, translating accurately, and avoiding mistakes. I did not know there was another way. I did not know the brain learns language through use, not explanation. I did not know children learn by reacting, not by translating. I did not know fluency grows from speed, not perfection. School did not break my English, but it trained my brain in a way that made fluency very difficult. Once I understood this, I stopped blaming myself. I stopped calling myself slow or shy. I saw the truth clearly. My brain was not wrong. It was trained wrong.
Translation feels safe because it gives the brain a sense of control. When I translated in my head, I felt protected. I was not guessing. I was not risking mistakes. I was checking. I was verifying. I was making sure everything was correct before I spoke. That feeling of control reduced anxiety. It made me feel responsible, careful, and prepared. Translation slowed everything down, and that slowness felt safe. When you translate, your brain works step by step. First, you listen. Then you convert the words into your native language. Then you think about the meaning. Then you build a response in your native language. Then you translate that response back into English. Then you check the grammar. Then you check the pronunciation. Only after all of that do you try to speak. That process feels logical. It feels intelligent. It feels like learning. But it is deadly for fluency. Real conversations do not wait for that process. People speak quickly. They react emotionally. They interrupt. They change topics. While your brain is still translating step 1, the conversation has already moved to step 5. Translation creates delay, and delay kills confidence. Every time I translated, my response arrived late, sometimes too late, sometimes not at all. The sentence disappeared before it could leave my mouth. That silence felt like failure, even though my brain was working very hard. This created a dangerous loop. The more I translated, the slower I became. The slower I became, the more anxious I felt. The more anxious I felt, the more I relied on translation. Translation felt safe, but it trained my brain to hesitate. Another problem was that translation kept my brain passive. When you translate, your brain is not reacting, it is processing, it is analyzing, it is observing language from the outside. But fluency requires participation. It requires immediate response, even when the response is imperfect. Translation removes instinct. Your brain never learns to connect English sounds directly to meaning. It never builds a fast path between what you hear and what you say. Instead, everything goes through a slow detour. That detour becomes a habit, and habits shape the brain.
The brain learns what you practice. If you practice translating, the brain becomes excellent at translating. If you practice reacting, the brain becomes fast at reacting. My problem was not that my brain was weak. My problem was that I trained it to do the wrong job. Translation also creates the illusion of understanding. I felt like I understood English because I could translate it, but understanding through translation is not the same as understanding directly. It is delayed understanding. It is second-hand understanding. Fluency requires first-hand understanding. When you think in English, meaning arrives instantly. When you translate, meaning arrives late, and that delay adds pressure. Pressure adds fear. Fear freezes the voice. That is why translation feels safe in the short term, but destroys fluency in the long term. It protects you from mistakes today, but it steals your voice tomorrow. Your brain does not become fluent by feeling safe. It becomes fluent by being trained to respond. Translation removes risk, but it also removes growth. And until I understood that safety was the problem, not the solution, my English stayed trapped inside my head, perfectly translated and completely silent. For a long time, I believed one sentence controlled my English. Think first, then speak. It sounded smart, responsible, safe. But this belief created a traffic jam in my brain. Every time I tried to speak, I stopped myself. I thought first, I organized ideas, I checked grammar, I searched for better words. While I was thinking, time passed, the conversation moved on, and my voice arrived too late. Fluency does not start from thinking. It starts from reacting. Native speakers do not build sentences in their heads before they speak. They feel meaning and words come out. Thinking happens after speaking, not before. Correction comes later, not at the start. When you force thinking before speaking, you block flow. You overload the brain. You train hesitation instead of movement. This belief felt logical, but it trained silence. To speak fluently, you do not need better thoughts. You need faster reactions, and that changes everything. I believed for a long time that my problem was vocabulary. I told myself, if I know more words, speaking will become easy. So I did what many learners do. I collected words. I memorized lists. I used flashcards. I wrote new words in notebooks. I highlighted them in books. My vocabulary grew. On paper, my English looked stronger. I could recognize more words when I read. I could understand more when I listened. Tests became easier. Teachers said I was improving. But when it was time to speak, nothing changed. I still froze. When someone asked me a question, my brain still translated. I still searched for the perfect word. I still checked grammar in my head, and even though I knew many words, I could not choose one fast enough. My silence stayed the same. More words did not give me speed. More words did not give me confidence. More words did not give me a voice. In fact, vocabulary made things worse. The more words I knew, the more choices my brain had to make. Instead of one simple word, I had 5 options. I compared them. I judged them. I waited for the best one. While I waited, the moment disappeared. Vocabulary increased pressure. I also noticed something painful. I knew many words, but I did not know how to use them automatically. They lived in my memory, not in my mouth. They were stored, not activated. Knowing a word is not the same as being able to say it under pressure. Vocabulary study trained recognition, not reaction. It helped me understand English, but it did not help me respond in English. My brain still needed time, and real conversations do not give you time. I realized I was building a library, but I never practiced speaking out loud.
I was preparing tools, but I never used them. Vocabulary gave me knowledge, but not movement. And fluency is movement. Another problem was expectation. When I knew more words, I expected myself to speak better. That expectation increased fear. One mistake felt unacceptable. If I knew the word, why didn't I use it? That question made me judge myself harder. So I stayed silent to avoid failure. More vocabulary did not remove translation. It made translation heavier. My brain still followed the same path. Hear, translate, think, choose, check, then maybe speak. Vocabulary only filled that path with more information. It did not change the path itself. That was the real problem. I did not need more words. I needed a new system. A system where English connects directly to meaning. A system where speaking happens before thinking. A system where speed matters more than accuracy. Until I changed how my brain worked, vocabulary was just decoration. Useful, but not transformational. I learned this the hard way. You can know thousands of words and still feel mute. Because fluency is not built by collecting words, it is built by training reaction. And until I trained my brain to react in English, my vocabulary stayed quiet, waiting, and unused. I used to believe grammar would save me. I thought, if I understand the rules clearly, my sentences will come out correctly. So I studied grammar seriously. I learned tenses, I learned structures, I learned exceptions. My notebooks were full of charts and explanations. Grammar gave me clarity, but it also gave me fear. When I tried to speak, grammar flooded my mind. Every sentence felt like a test. Before opening my mouth, questions appeared instantly. Past or present, simple or continuous, article or no article, correct preposition or wrong one. My brain became a classroom. Instead of expressing an idea, I was checking rules. Instead of reacting, I was evaluating. Instead of communicating, I was judging myself in real time. Grammar made my brain slower. Speaking turned into problem solving, and problem solving takes time. Real conversations do not wait for that time. People expect a response, not a perfect sentence. The pressure was intense. I felt like every sentence had a score. One mistake meant failure. One pause meant weakness. So I paused, and I failed. Grammar did not help me speak. It blocked me from speaking. The more grammar I knew, the higher my standards became. I believed I should speak correctly because I knew better. That belief made me more afraid of mistakes. I waited longer. I spoke less. Silence felt safer than being wrong. Grammar also changed how I heard English. Instead of hearing meaning, I heard structure. I listened for tenses. I noticed errors. I analyzed sentences instead of understanding them naturally. My brain stayed in study mode, not conversation mode. Grammar trained my brain to monitor, not to move. I realized something important later. Grammar is slow by nature. It is designed for writing, editing, and reflection. Speaking is fast. It happens in the moment. When you bring grammar into speaking, you slow the system down. Native speakers do not think about grammar when they talk. Grammar happens automatically in the background. But I had trained it to sit in the front of my brain. That was the mistake. Grammar should support speaking, not control it. I used it as a shield to avoid risk. As long as I was thinking, I was not speaking. And as long as I was not speaking, fear stayed in charge. Grammar did not make me fluent. It made me careful, and careful is the enemy of flow. I finally understood that grammar is not a switch you turn on while speaking. It is something you absorb through use, not something you apply consciously in conversation. When grammar leads, the voice freezes.
And until I removed grammar from the moment of speaking, my brain stayed slow, crowded, and silent, even though it was full of correct rules. I also tried motivation. When learning felt hard, I searched for inspiration. I watched videos about success. People spoke confidently on screen. They smiled. They said powerful things like, believe in yourself, and you can do it. For a moment, I felt hope. Motivation gave me energy, but it did not give me change. After the video ended, my brain was the same. The fear was the same. The translation was the same. When it was time to speak, nothing came out. My voice still waited. My mind still translated. Motivation changed how I felt. It did not change how my brain worked. I confused inspiration with progress. I thought feeling motivated meant I was improving, but motivation only lives in emotion. Speaking lives in habit. My brain did not need excitement. It needed rewiring. Watching inspiring stories did not retrain my reactions. It did not shorten the delay between hearing and speaking. It did not remove translation. It did not build reflex. My brain stayed on the same old path. Motivation made promises. Habits make results. Each time I felt inspired, I believed tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow arrived with the same patterns. I still listened, translated, thought, corrected, and stayed silent. Nothing changed because nothing in my routine changed. The truth was uncomfortable. My problem was not lack of desire, it was lack of retraining. The brain does not change because you feel inspired. It changes because you repeat a new behavior enough times. Neural pathways do not care about motivation. They care about frequency. I was motivating the wrong system. I was talking to my emotions, not my brain. Real change did not require stronger feelings. It required different actions. Small, boring, daily actions that forced my brain to react instead of analyze. Until I changed how I practiced, motivation stayed temporary. It made me feel good for 10 minutes, then left me exactly where I was. That is when I understood this clearly. Motivation without rewiring fails. Every time. If your brain stays the same, your English stays the same, no matter how inspired you feel. To speak fluently, I did not need more motivation. I needed a new system. The moment I understood the truth did not come from a book or a teacher. It came from one clear realization. The real problem was not English. It was reaction. For years, I believed my English was weak. I blamed vocabulary. I blamed grammar. I blamed confidence. But none of those were the real issue. The issue was speed. The issue was how my brain responded in real time. My brain was trained to translate. Every time I heard English, my brain followed the same path. Hear the sound, convert it to my native language, understand the meaning, build a response, translate it back, check it, fix it, then speak. That path was long, too long. By the time my brain finished, the moment was gone. I realized something important. My brain was not broken, it was obedient. It was doing exactly what I trained it to do. For years, I practiced translation, so my brain became good at translation, not at speaking. Speaking is a reflex skill. Translation is an analysis skill. I was using the wrong system for the job. English fluency does not depend on how much you know. It depends on how fast your brain reacts without thinking. Just like driving, typing, or walking, you do not translate instructions, you respond automatically. But I never trained that. I trained delay. That realization changed everything. I stopped asking, how can I learn more English? I started asking, how can I retrain my reactions? The goal was no longer accuracy. The goal was speed. The goal was not correct sentences. The goal was immediate response. Once I saw this, the frustration disappeared. I stopped feeling stupid. I stopped blaming myself. I understood that my silence was not a personal failure. It was a training outcome. And training can be changed. I did not need a better brain. I needed a different habit. The truth was simple but powerful. If you train translation, you get silence. If you train reaction, you get fluency. English was never the enemy. My training was. And once I understood that, I finally knew where to begin.
For a long time, I chased the wrong goal. I wanted to think in English. I believed that if I could force my brain to think in English, speaking would become easy. So I tried to push myself. I told myself, think in English, think harder. But nothing changed. The more I tried, the more pressure I felt. Then I understood something simple. Thinking in English is not a goal, it is a result. Children do not sit and decide to think in a language. They do not analyze. They do not translate. They react. They hear a sound, connect it to meaning, and respond. No planning, no grammar, just action. Their brains learn through behavior. The brain does not change because of intention. It changes because of repetition. I realized that I was trying to control thinking instead of training action. I wanted my brain to switch modes without changing what I did every day. That is not how the brain works. The brain learns by doing the same thing again and again. If you react in your native language, the brain strengthens that path. If you translate first, the brain strengthens translation. The brain does not choose the best method, it chooses the most practiced one. So, thinking in English cannot be forced. It happens automatically when translation is no longer needed. When you respond in English again and again, even slowly, even badly, the brain adapts. It builds new shortcuts. Meaning connects directly to English sound. Over time, thinking disappears from the process. You do not think your way into fluency. You behave your way into it. This removed pressure for me. I stopped chasing a mental state. I stopped asking, why am I not thinking in English yet? Instead, I focused on one thing: react in English. Short answers, fast responses, no correction. Little by little, something changed. I noticed I was not translating anymore. I noticed English appeared faster. I noticed thinking happened less. Thinking in English arrived quietly, not because I wanted it, but because my behavior trained it. That is the truth. Fluency is not created in the mind first. It is created in action. And when action changes, the brain follows. The biggest change did not come from learning something new. It came from stopping something old. I stopped translating on purpose. This decision felt scary at first. Translation was my safety net. When I translated, I felt in control. I felt prepared. Without translation, I felt exposed. But I finally understood that translation was the reason my brain was slow. So I made one clear rule: no translating at all. When I heard English, I forced myself to stay in English, even if I did not understand every word, even if the sentence felt incomplete. I resisted the urge to jump back to my native language. At first, my brain fought me. It wanted to translate automatically. That habit was strong. Years of training do not disappear in one day. Sometimes my brain slipped. Sometimes I caught myself translating without noticing. But each time I noticed, I came back to English. I also changed how I spoke. Before, if I could not say a sentence perfectly, I said nothing. Now I did the opposite. If I could not say it correctly, I said it shorter. If I did not know a word, I used a simpler one.
If I did not know the sentence, I broke it into pieces. Instead of saying nothing, I said something. For example, instead of trying to explain a complex idea, I said one simple sentence, then another, then another. Meaning came first, perfection came later. I accepted missing words. This was difficult. I hated feeling limited. I hated sounding simple. But I reminded myself of one truth. Silence teaches nothing. Speaking teaches everything. Each time I spoke without translating, my brain struggled. But that struggle was important. It meant the brain was working differently. It meant new connections were forming. I noticed something interesting after a while. My brain became quieter. Before, my head was full of noise. Grammar rules, word choices, corrections, translation. Now there was less thinking. I reacted more. I did not wait for the perfect sentence. I let the first possible sentence come out. My responses were not beautiful, but they were fast. Speed mattered more than accuracy at this stage. Speed trained reflex. Reflex trained fluency. I also stopped correcting myself in the middle of speaking. Before, if I made a mistake, I stopped immediately. That trained interruption. Now, I finished the sentence, even if it was wrong. I let it exist. Mistakes were allowed. This was not about being careless. It was about retraining priority. I chose flow over correctness. I chose reaction over evaluation. Little by little, something changed. English started to feel less heavy. It felt more direct. I did not need to go through my native language anymore. Meaning connected to English more quickly. Not perfectly, but faster than before. I realized that translation was not helping me understand English. It was slowing down my response. When I removed translation, understanding improved naturally because my brain had no other choice. The brain adapts to necessity. When translation was available, my brain used it. When translation was blocked, my brain built a new path. That path was uncomfortable at first, but it became familiar through repetition. I also became more patient with myself. I stopped judging my English level by how complex my sentences were. I judged progress by how quickly I responded. Fast and simple was better than slow and perfect. This shift changed my brain more than any book or course, not because it added knowledge, but because it removed interference. Translation was the interference. Once I stopped translating on purpose, my brain finally began to do what it was always capable of doing: react. And reaction is where fluency begins.
For most of my life, I waited to feel ready before I spoke. I told myself I needed more time, more practice, more confidence, more certainty. I believed that one day everything would feel clear and then I would speak. That day never came, so I changed one rule. I spoke before I was ready. This felt wrong at first. Every part of my old training told me to wait, to think, to prepare the sentence in my head, to make sure it was correct. Speaking early felt risky and uncomfortable. But I finally understood something important. Readiness does not come before action. It comes after. When I spoke before I was ready, I forced my brain to react instead of analyze. I did not give it time to translate. I did not give it time to judge. I answered quickly, even with short sentences, even with basic words. Speed became my priority. I stopped chasing perfect sentences. I chased immediate responses. If someone asked a question, I answered with the first simple idea that came to my mind. I did not polish it. I did not improve it. I let it be rough. At first, my English sounded weak. My sentences were short, sometimes incomplete. But something important was happening. My brain was learning timing. Each time I responded quickly,
My brain learned that speed mattered more than correctness. It learned that speaking was safe, even when imperfect. It learned that silence was no longer the default. I noticed my fear changed. Before, fear stopped me completely. Now, fear came, but I spoke anyway. Fear became a background feeling, not a command. It no longer decided my behavior. Speaking before I was ready also removed pressure. When you wait for perfect sentences, you carry heavy expectations. When you speak early, expectations drop. You are not trying to impress, you are trying to communicate. That shift matters. I also realized that perfect sentences do not exist in real conversations. Native speakers pause, they restart, they correct themselves, they simplify ideas. Conversation is messy by nature. By waiting for perfection, I was waiting for something unrealistic. When I spoke early, I joined real communication. I became part of the flow instead of watching it from the outside. Over time, my reactions became faster. Words came out more naturally. I did not think less because I was smarter. I thought less because thinking was no longer required. That is how reflex is built, not by waiting, by moving. I stopped asking, "Is this sentence correct?" I started asking, "Did I respond?" That single question changed everything. Speaking before I was ready trained my brain to trust itself. It built momentum. It reduced fear. It replaced hesitation with action. I was not fluent yet, but I was no longer silent. And once silence is broken, progress becomes inevitable. Fluency does not begin when you feel ready. It begins when you speak anyway. That was the shift that finally set my brain in motion. The final shift was simple but powerful. I stopped treating English like a special activity. I stopped saving it for study time. I started using English inside my daily life. I listened while doing housework. When I washed dishes, I played simple English audio. Not lessons, not grammar explanations, just stories, conversations, clear voices. I did not sit down. I did not take notes. My hands were busy. My body was relaxed. English entered my ears without pressure. Sometimes I understood. Sometimes I didn't. I did not stop the audio. I did not rewind. I let English pass like background music. Slowly, my brain stopped treating it as a problem to solve. It became sound, rhythm, flow. I listened while cleaning. I listened while walking. I listened while resting. English stopped being something I prepared for. It became something that existed around me. Then I did something that once felt very strange. I talked to myself. At first, it felt uncomfortable. I felt silly, but I spoke anyway. I said simple things out loud, very simple. I'm tired. I need coffee. Today was busy. No audience, no judgment, no correction. Just my voice. Talking to myself trained something important. It trained my mouth to move without fear. It trained my brain to connect meaning directly to English sounds without translation. I did not translate first. I spoke with what I had. If I did not know a word, I used another word. If I did not know a sentence, I made it shorter. I accepted missing vocabulary. I accepted broken sentences. I kept going. This repetition mattered more than any lesson. My brain began to recognize English sounds as familiar. Familiar sounds feel safe. Safe sounds do not trigger fear. Over time, something changed quietly. English stopped feeling foreign. My brain stopped reacting with tension when it heard English. The sounds no longer caused panic. They caused recognition. Familiarity replaced stress. That is how the brain learns, not through explanation, through exposure. I was not forcing my brain to understand. I was allowing it to adapt, just like children do. They hear language every day. They do not analyze it, they absorb it. Daily exposure created comfort. Comfort created calm. Calm allowed speech. I also noticed that my thinking changed. I did not translate as often. Simple phrases came automatically, not because I studied them, but because I heard them repeatedly in real contexts. English started to feel natural, not correct. That was the goal. Using English in daily life removed pressure. There was no performance, no test, no success or failure, just contact. And contact rewires the brain, slowly, quietly, reliably. I did not become fluent from one big effort. I became fluent from small daily moments, moments that felt unimportant but added up. When English becomes part of your life, your brain stops resisting it. And when resistance disappears, thinking in English begins on its own. Not forced, not planned, but natural.
The last change was about simplicity. I stopped trying to fix everything at once. Before, my brain was overloaded. I wanted better vocabulary, better grammar, better pronunciation, better fluency, all at the same time. Every conversation felt heavy because I was carrying too many goals in my head. So I changed the rule. One focus per day. Just one. Some days, my only focus was questions. I practiced asking simple questions all day. What do you think? How does this work? Is this okay? Other days, my focus was past tense. I talked about yesterday, what I did, what happened. Nothing else mattered. Another day, my focus was pronunciation. One sound, one small detail. I repeated it while walking, while working, while talking to myself. I stopped overloading my brain. The brain learns best when it is calm, when it feels safe, when the task is clear. One focus removed confusion. It gave my brain a clear signal. This is what we practiced today. And repetition did the rest. I repeated the same pattern again and again throughout the day, not for hours, just many small moments. These repetitions created something powerful, new pathways. The brain changes through repetition, not effort. Every time I used the same structure, the same sound, the same idea, my brain strengthened that path. Slowly, it became automatic. I did not need to think anymore. That is how fluency grows, not by learning more, by repeating less. One focus per day also removed pressure. I was not trying to be fluent. I was trying to repeat one thing. That felt manageable. That felt human. Some days were boring. Some days felt slow. But progress was happening quietly. Over time, those small focuses connected. What I practiced last week showed up naturally this week. My brain remembered without effort. I stopped asking, why am I not fluent yet? I started asking, what is today's one focus? That question kept me moving. No overload, no panic, no confusion. Just repetition. And repetition builds reflex. One focus per day was not exciting, but it was effective. It respected how the brain actually learns. That simple habit turned learning into training, and training changed my brain, one small path at a time. I remember the first time it happened very clearly. Someone spoke to me in English. A simple question, nothing special. In the past, my brain would immediately switch modes. Translate, analyze, prepare, delay. But this time, something was different. There was no pause, no translation, no voice in my head searching for the right words. The answer came out before I had time to think about it. It surprised me. I heard myself speaking, and for brief moments, I did not recognize that voice. It sounded natural, not perfect, but real. The sentence was simple, maybe even incomplete, but it was fast, immediate, and most importantly, it was not translated. There was no first language step. The meaning went straight to sound. That was the moment I realized my brain was changing. I did not feel smart. I did not feel confident. I felt normal, and that was new. Before, speaking English always felt like work, heavy work. My brain felt tired before I even opened my mouth. This time, there was no effort, just reaction. I did not plan the sentence. I did not build it. I did not check it. It simply appeared. After I spoke, my brain caught up. I remember thinking, wait, did I just say that without thinking? The thought came after the sentence, not before. That order mattered. For years, I believed thinking had to come first. This moment proved the opposite. My brain reacted first. Thinking came later. The conversation continued. I stayed present. I listened instead of preparing. I answered instead of freezing. My mind felt quieter than it ever had before. This was not fluency, but it was freedom. I still made mistakes, I still missed words, but I did not stop, and stopping less changed everything. That first moment did not last forever. The old habit came back sometimes. Translation returned under pressure. Fear still appeared, but something important had shifted. I now had proof. Proof that my brain could respond without translating. Proof that silence was not permanent. Proof that English could move faster than fear. That single moment changed how I saw progress. Progress was not sounding advanced. Progress was reacting without delay. From that day on, I stopped measuring improvement by vocabulary size or grammar accuracy. I measured it by speed of response. Did I answer quickly? Did I stay present? Did the sentence come out before fear stopped it? Those became my new signs of growth. The first time I didn't translate was not dramatic. No celebration, no big emotion, but it was quiet evidence that training was working. My brain was learning a new path, and once a new path exists, it can be used again. That moment taught me something important. Fluency does not arrive loudly. It arrives silently, in small reactions you almost miss unless you are paying attention. And when you notice them, you know you are on the right path. Another clear sign appeared soon after that first breakthrough. My English was not more accurate, but it was faster. And that changed everything. Before, I measured progress by correctness. Right grammar, right tense, right words. If I could not be correct, I preferred to stay silent. Silence felt safer than being wrong. Now, something flipped. I started answering faster even when I knew the sentence was not perfect. Sometimes I used the wrong tense. Sometimes I chose the wrong word. Sometimes the sentence sounded awkward in my own ears. But I did not stop. I continued speaking. That was new. In the past, one mistake would shut me down. My brain would interrupt itself. That's wrong. Fix it. Say it better. And while I was correcting, the conversation moved on without me. Now I let the mistake exist. I finished the sentence anyway. Speed came before accuracy. And surprisingly, communication improved. People understood me. They responded. They did not wait for perfect English. They waited for meaning. As long as the meaning arrived, the conversation stayed alive. That taught me an important lesson. Accuracy helps clarity, but speed creates connection. When you speak faster, your brain stays in the moment. It listens instead of planning. It reacts instead of analyzing. It stays present. When you speak slowly because you are checking everything, your brain leaves the conversation. It goes inside itself. And once it leaves, your voice disappears. I noticed something else too. The faster I spoke, the less afraid I felt. Fear needs time to grow. Fear appears in pauses. Fear lives in hesitation. When I spoke quickly, fear had no space to interrupt. Even when I made mistakes, fear did not win. Momentum protected me. At first, my sentences were simple, very simple, sometimes childish, but they came out naturally. And over time, something interesting happened. Accuracy started to improve on its own. Not because I focused on it, but because my brain was practicing real use. When you repeat fast, imperfect speaking, your brain collects data. It hears patterns. It notices what sounds right and what does not. Correction happens quietly in the background. I did not force it. I did not stop to fix every error. I let repetition do the work. This went against everything I had learned before. I was taught to slow down, think carefully, and avoid mistakes. But that approach trained silence, not speech. Speed trained reflex. Reflex trained fluency. Accuracy came later. I also realized that native speakers do not speak because they are accurate. They are accurate because they have spoken thousands of times. They did not wait to be right. They spoke until right became automatic. That changed my goal. My goal was no longer to sound correct. My goal was to stay in the conversation, to answer quickly, to keep going, to let the sentence finish, even if it was wrong. Each fast response was a small win, not because it was perfect, but because it existed. Over time, my brain learned a new rule. Speaking fast is safer than staying silent. And once my brain accepted that rule, fluency finally had room to grow. Speed came first, accuracy came later, and that order made all the difference. For a long time, I believed my brain was slow. I believed something inside me was broken. I watched others respond quickly in English while I froze, and I told myself a painful story. They are smarter. Their brains work better. Mine is just not made for this. That story felt true, but it was wrong. What I finally understood is simple, but powerful. Your brain is not weak. Your brain did exactly what you trained it to do. For years, I trained my brain to translate. Every time I heard English, I converted it into my native language. Every time I wanted to speak, I built the sentence in my head first. Every time I waited for the perfect answer, my brain learned one rule. Do not react fast. Stop, think, check, delay. That was my training. So when real conversations happened, my brain followed that training perfectly. It slowed down, it hesitated, it overloaded itself. Not because it was broken, but because it was obedient. The brain is a pattern machine. It does not judge your goals. It does not care about fluency. It only repeats what you practice. If you practice silence, your brain becomes excellent at silence. If you practice translation, your brain becomes excellent at translation. If you practice hesitation, your brain becomes excellent at hesitation. That is not failure, that is learning. The problem was never intelligence. The problem was habit. I had spent years strengthening the wrong habit. I rehearsed it daily without realizing it. Each pause, each apology, each moment I stayed quiet reinforced the same neural path. And neural paths grow stronger with use.
So when you say my brain is slow, what you are really saying is my brain is using an old path. Old does not mean permanent. It means familiar. This realization changed how I treated myself. I stopped blaming my ability. I stopped attacking my confidence. I stopped asking, what's wrong with me? I started asking a better question. What did I train? And once you ask that, the solution becomes clear. You do not need a new brain. You need new repetitions. When I began speaking without translating, my brain struggled at first. It felt uncomfortable. It felt clumsy. That was not weakness. That was unlearning. Every time I spoke directly in English, even badly, I was building a new path, a faster path, a simpler path, a reflex path. At first, the old path was stronger. Translation pulled me back, but I kept practicing the new one, and slowly the balance shifted. The old habit weakened, the new habit strengthened. This is how the brain always works. Nothing magical, nothing personal, just repetition. So if you feel slow, do not panic. If your mind freezes, do not judge yourself. Your brain is not failing. It is following instructions you gave it long ago. And the best news is this: you can give it new instructions today. Train speed instead of perfection. Train reaction instead of translation. Train action instead of waiting. Your brain will follow. It always does. Fear and translation did not appear in your brain by accident. They were learned, slowly, repeatedly, quietly. Every time you hesitated before speaking, your brain learned something. Every time you translated a sentence in your head, your brain learned something. Every time you stayed silent to avoid a mistake, your brain learned something. It learned that English is dangerous. It learned that mistakes are risky. It learned that silence is safer than action. Fear was not born in you. Fear was trained into you. The same is true for translation. In the beginning, translation feels helpful. It feels logical. It feels controlled. When you translate, your brain feels safe because it understands everything before acting. That sense of control creates comfort, and comfort is powerful. So the brain repeats what feels safe. Listen, translate, think, check, speak. That loop becomes automatic, not because it is effective, but because it feels familiar. Over time, your brain connects speaking English with effort, pressure, and risk. The moment English appears, fear appears with it, not as an emotion you choose, but as a habit your nervous system has practiced thousands of times. This is why fear shows up even when you know the answer. This is why your chest tightens before your mind decides anything. Your brain learned to react that way. But here is the most important truth. Anything learned can be unlearned. The brain is not fixed. The brain is adaptable. The brain changes based on repetition. This is not motivation. This is biology. When you repeat a behavior, the neural pathway grows stronger. When you stop using a pathway, it weakens. This applies to fear just as it applies to language. Fear is not a personality trait. Fear is a practiced response, and responses can be retrained. When I understood this, everything shifted. I stopped treating fear as an enemy. I stopped asking, why am I still afraid? Instead, I asked, what am I practicing? If you practice translating, you strengthen translation. If you practice waiting, you strengthen hesitation. If you practice avoiding, you strengthen fear. But if you practice speaking before thinking, something new happens. At first, fear increases. That is normal. The brain resists change. It prefers old paths because they are efficient. Even bad habits feel safe when they are familiar. But each time you speak without translating, you send your brain new data. You teach it, this is not dangerous. You teach it, we survived. You teach it, we can continue. Slowly, the fear response weakens. Not overnight, not magically, but reliably. The brain begins to predict safety instead of threat. Translation loses its grip. Reaction becomes faster. Silence stops feeling like protection. This is how change actually happens. Not by understanding more, not by thinking harder, but by repeating a different action. You do not erase fear by fighting it. You erase fear by showing your brain a new pattern. And that is why you are not slow. That is why you are not broken. Your brain learned fear. Your brain learned translation. And your brain can learn speed, confidence, and flow the same way. Through practice, through repetition, through patience. Nothing is wrong with you. You are simply in the middle of retraining. And that means progress is already possible. If you want your brain to change, you do not need a new plan next month. You do not need a perfect system. You do not need more preparation. You can start today, right now. Here are 5 simple rules to train your brain to think and react in English. They are simple, but they work only if you apply them consistently. Rule 1. Stop translating. This is the hardest rule, and it is the most important one. The moment you translate, you tell your brain that English must pass through another language first. That keeps the old pathway alive. Instead, accept partial understanding. If you do not know a word, skip it. If you cannot express a full idea, express a smaller one. Do not go back to your native language. Your brain will feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is not failure. It is rewiring. Rule 2. Speak fast, not perfect. Speed matters more than accuracy in the beginning. When you speak quickly, you prevent your brain from opening the translation loop. Short answers, fast reactions. Even 1 or 2 words are enough. Mistakes will happen. Let them happen. Fluency grows from motion, not from correctness. Perfect sentences build pressure. Fast sentences build reflex. Rule 3. Use simple sentences. Simple is powerful. Do not try to sound smart. Do not search for advanced words. Use what you already have. I think so. I don't know. Maybe. It's difficult. These sentences may feel basic, but they train your brain to respond automatically. Complexity can come later. Reflex must come first. Children do not start with long sentences. Neither should you. Rule 4. Practice every day, briefly. Do not wait for long study sessions. 5 to 10 minutes every day is enough if it is active. Speak out loud. Talk to yourself. Describe what you are doing. Answer imaginary questions. Daily repetition tells your brain that English is normal, not special. Consistency changes neural pathways faster than intensity. Missing one day is not failure. Quitting is. Rule 5. Trust the process. This is where most people fail. They expect immediate results. They measure progress by perfection. That kills momentum. Instead, measure progress by behavior. Did you speak today? Did you avoid translating? Did you react faster than before? The brain changes quietly. You may not notice improvement at first. Then one day, a sentence comes out without an effort. That is the process working. Understand this clearly. You will feel worse before you feel better. You will feel slower before you feel faster. Your brain is leaving an old habit. Resistance is normal. Do not interpret discomfort as proof that it is not working. Discomfort is proof that change has started. If you follow these 5 rules, your brain will adapt, not because you force it, but because the brain always adapts to what you repeat. Stop translating, speak fast,
Keep it simple, repeat daily, trust the process. That is enough. You do not need confidence first. You do not need fluency first. You need action first. Start today, not tomorrow. Your brain is ready to learn something new. You are not stupid. You are not slow. And there is nothing wrong with your brain. Your brain did exactly what you trained it to do. For years, you trained it to translate. You trained it to hesitate. You trained it to wait for perfection. So it did. That was not failure. That was learning. And here is the most important truth I want you to remember after this story ends. Anything that was trained can be retrained. Your brain is not fixed. Your habits are not permanent. Your past does not decide your future. If your brain learned to translate, it can learn to react. If your brain learned fear, it can learn speed. If your brain learned silence, it can learn voice. Change does not happen in one moment. It happens quietly, one sentence at a time, one day at a time. You do not need to wait until you feel ready. You do not need to feel confident. You only need to practice differently. Speak before you think. React before you translate. Accept mistakes without stopping. That is how a brain changes. If this video helped you see yourself differently, do not ignore that feeling. That feeling means something inside you shifted. That is the beginning of rewiring. Subscribe to this channel, not for grammar tips, not for quick tricks, but for transformation. Here, we do not chase perfection. We build habits. We train reflexes. We retrain the brain. You are not here to become someone else. You are here to reclaim your voice. This is not the end. This is your beginning. Start today. Speak anyway. Train your brain patiently. I will be here with you. One story, one lesson, one step forward at a time. Your voice matters, and it deserves to be used.